Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Corner Office on Final Four Eve. Jack and I are super excited to be in the studio. And if you're looking at me right now and you're asking, this guy kind of looks like he got out of the gym. Yeah, I did. I was in a dodgeball tournament, and you know what? I don't take days off. Okay. So after that was over, we ran back in here because we knew that we had to get this episode out as quickly as possible. And I am yet to shower. So if that's an issue for any viewers out there, very sorry, but we're committed. We're committed to sports on this show.
And so obviously I'm going to ask the question that everyone out there is wondering, did you win the dodgeball tournament?
We did not win. No, we did not.
So
we won a lot.
As what I take it, the only athletic team in the dodgeball tournament lost.
You would be wrong.
Who else was in it? Who else was in it?
There were two basketball teams. We lost to our seniors. It was the underclassmen and the upperclassmen. We lost to our seniors and juniors 2 times to get eliminated. There were 4 football teams in it, field hockey, 2 volleyball teams.
Oh, I was very wrong.
There was no baseball because they had practice, but there were some dogs in there today. And honestly, I played pretty well. You know, I kind of do my thing when it comes to dodgeball. When the dodgeballs start rolling, you know, the balls go out and everybody's running after it. I'm kind of just standing on the back, and then when a ball comes to me, I'm throwing my goddamn arm off.
When I first got to school, there was like this rec night at the rec center.
Yeah.
And the entire freshman class went. And it was during the week when only freshmen were on campus, and they had this huge dodgeball game. And I wasn't in it per se, like I wasn't on either team, but I was like standing on the baseline, and a dodgeball happened to roll to my feet. So I threw it as hard as I could towards everyone and hit this poor kid right in the face.
Oh, God.
And you know what? He went out. So technically at college, I am 100% conversion rate in terms of dodgeball throwing.
Your KD is 1-0 with 100% accuracy.
Yeah.
Hey. Look, we got some competitors and some athletes on this show, and if you're not trying to rip your arm off when you play dodgeball, you're not doing it right. All right.
Yeah, you better wake up with a sore shoulder the next day. Alex, I will say I am competing in a 3v3 basketball tournament this weekend.
That's massive.
For charity.
You love to hear it. Yeah, so this was also for charity, by the way. I just want to throw that out there. Was for charity, was for a good cause, but I mean, there was also some bragging rights on the line and whatnot. And
let's just say I am preparing to leave it all on the line. I'm preparing to take this 3v3 basketball tournament for charity way too seriously.
There is nothing better than intramural sports at college. Nothing. Yeah. But that's besides the point. First things first order of business. I mean, we got to talk about these 2 matchups that we're going to be seeing over the weekend. We have Purdue versus NC State and UConn versus Alabama. I mean, 2 fantastic games going into what's been, a lot of people have said it's been a really chalk tournament thus far. And you do have 2 1 seeds who are going to be in that Final Four spot. But then again, you got an 11 seed in NC State who's played fantastic basketball this far, and a 4 seed in Alabama who I don't think anybody was really anticipating making it this far.
Except for my brother's best friend, who is in the top 0.01 percentile of bracket filler outs. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I think everybody knew that NC State was going to be hot going into the tournament, but I did kind of expect them to cool off by now, and they have showed no signs of slowing down, which is pretty amazing. But I think that's the first matchup that we have to talk about is just this Purdue versus NC State game, you know, because the major storyline going into it is their 2 dominant centers in DJ Burns, who's played fantastic basketball thus far. Probably, if I had to pick, if they were to win the national championship, he would be their tournament player of the year.
Absolutely. I agree.
And the same goes for Purdue's player, Zach Edey, who just dropped 41 points in their matchup against I watched the game. I can't remember who they played. Tennessee. Thank you for remembering that. Purdue versus Tennessee. Yeah, I got that. Purdue versus Tennessee dropped 40 against them, and they've looked very dominant thus far, and their guard play is much improved from last year when they lost to a 16 seed. But everybody's talking about this DJ Burns versus Zach Edey matchup, so I just wanted to get your take on what you've seen so far from both these players, and how do you think this shakes out?
Yeah, I mean, for me, obviously, it is the most anticipated matchup in the college basketball universe this season, hands down, in my opinion. You have the National Player of the Year consensus. I think we can all agree on that. Going against the people's champion right now in DJ Burns. Yeah. He's going to walk out with the boombox to that song that everybody's
bad.
seen the video. Now I'm trying to live my life. I've had that on repeat all week, shamelessly. And I think, and this may be a hot take, I think that NC State, matchup-wise, is the best team left out of the 4 to beat Purdue.
You think they're better than UConn matchup-wise?
I think that in terms of – I think that skill-wise, UConn is better. But just logistically looking at it, you have – for NC State, you have bigger guards than Purdue who can go over the top and score. So if DJ Horne has a night, then it will be trouble for Purdue.
Correct, yeah.
I think that the 2 big matchup for NC State with Diarra and DJ Burns may pose some trouble for Purdue. Not only on the offensive side in terms of NC State playing offense, but also on the rebounding game. I think that they will crash the boards, and I don't think that in this tournament yet Purdue has gone against a team that is as good at rebounding as NC State is. And I think that will be a factor in this matchup. So maybe skill-wise, UConn is better, but I think that logistically speaking, NC State has the best chance of taking down this Purdue team, in my opinion, right now.
Yeah, I don't know if I would totally agree with them being the best matchup. I think having a guy like Donovan Clingan, who's 7'2" in the center against Zach Edey, is probably a good matchup there. But one of the most interesting things about this matchup that I found watching the Tennessee game, actually, even though Zach Edey had a fantastic game, was that when he was matched up with a guy who was more physically strong and could push him out further, he was less effective. And obviously DJ Burns is 6'10", 275 pounds. So like he's an immovable object.
Well, and DJ Burns' game is also like much more dynamic than people realize. He doesn't have to score right in the low post. He can back it out. He has like a baby hook that he uses all the time. He's even got a bit of a fadeaway jumper, which is something that Zach Edey is not used to guarding.
Well, I think that defensively Zach Edey will have problems with DJ Burns. It's offensively is DJ Burns going to get in foul trouble. That's the biggest question about this entire game is if Diarra and DJ Burns get in foul trouble, it's over.
Yeah, it's over.
They can't win without either of those guys on the floor. I do agree with your take on guard play. I think DJ Horne is going to be an interesting matchup for whoever they draw. Maybe it'll be Fletcher Loyer Braden Smith. You think?
Yeah.
I think they'll guard him with Fletcher Loyer?
I don't know if they can guard him with Fletcher Loyer. I don't know if he's really quick enough to keep up with DJ Horne.
I agree. I think
it'll probably be Braden Smith.
And that's an interesting matchup too, because Braden Smith has played very well thus far in the tournament. He's been very good at facilitating. I think he only has like 7 or 8 turnovers through the entire thing. Like he's been a big assist guy, made some big threes. And again, another one of those questions with this NC State matchup is how much are they going to send a double? Because I could see them getting down early if they continue to try and double the post and Zach Edey just kicks out for 3-point shooters and they're starting to make shots because it's in Phoenix and, shots weren't falling against Tennessee, but they will in this type of game. So I'm very interested to see how this matchup runs. I think that if you get DJ Burns and Ramadan Diarra in foul trouble, Ramadan's over, but, he was playing out of his mind in Ramadan. So props to him. But if you get those two in foul trouble, NC State's going to have a lot of trouble beating this Purdue team.
So I think that there's 2 ways that this game goes, right? You look at it one way, the 2 bigs on NC State stay out of foul trouble.
Yep.
They play good defense and it's down to the wire.
Yeah.
Or they get, they pick up 2 fouls in the first half, have to sit out for a bit, as DJ Burns did against Duke, guarding Kyle Filipowski, picked up 2 fouls early. And then Purdue starts to run away with it. And it's not crazy to say that may happen. So I think that there are 2 outcomes to this game. I don't think there's a reality where NC State runs away with it.
I agree. I think it'll be a close game either way. NC State's played a lot of close games thus far, and they've been pretty good at winning.
They've been good
in the past couple weeks.
And they've won 11 in a row, I believe now.
Oof, yeah, it could be something trending.
Shades of that UConn team that's
true,
won
but
an MSG.
It should be noted that an 11 seed has never won a Final Four matchup, and there have been 5 or 6 of them that have gone to the tournament thus far. It was LSU in '83, I want to say, and then Loyola Chicago, obviously UCLA, George Mason, VCU 6. So now NC State being a Final Four team. But it's certainly an interesting matchup. The way that NC State is playing, and the fact that like although they've like kind of burst onto the scene, unless you were watching ACC basketball, like a lot of teams were looking at this team going into the tournament, being like, they're not a team we want to play. You know, the way that they have kind of figured it out down the stretch.
I think every team was looking at them and saying, we would rather not see them.
I agree. I think that National Player of the Year privilege is definitely going to be on a factor. Zach Edey has kind of gotten calls throughout this entire tournament that people have kind of scratched their heads at, even though I do think he gets fouled a lot. And
well, but I mean, if you get a mismatch, right, and you're a 6'7" forward going against a 7'2" Zach Edey, you're gonna
he's 7'4". Yeah,
you're gonna make a swipe at the ball, or you're gonna be a little extra physical.
Right.
You have to let the boys play, especially in a Final Four game. I don't think that. I mean, yeah, I think that he gets calls, and I think that he gets, in my opinion, a little too many. I don't think that they've let the boys play enough. Maybe that's because they were, you know, the narrative is Purdue needs to go further.
Yeah.
Maybe the narrative is, you know, National Player of the Year. We saw that Kentucky team 2 years ago go out in this first round to St. Peter's. We can't have that happen again. I don't think that they'll keep it up. He's been shooting around 14 free throws a game, maybe more.
Yeah, he shoots a lot of free throws.
16 free throws a game. I think that it'll be down between that 8 and 10 mark.
Okay.
Which is, it's still a lot of fouls, but if you watch that Tennessee game, they were
basically to the line 20 times. Yeah.
They were playing hack-a-shack, essentially, with Zach Edey, and it did kill them because, I mean, as much as I do love to support the main guys, JP Estrella was struggling against Zach Edey in the post.
And he honestly played a pretty good game.
He did play a pretty good game. And you're asking a lot of a freshman who averages 3-4 minutes a game to come in and play against the National Player of the Year.
Correct.
I was impressed by what he did.
I agree.
But what that proved was that if your bench is not deep, especially as this NC State bench is, you cannot play hack-a-shack with Zach Edey at all.
I agree.
So they have to be very careful of it. And that's the biggest storyline of this game.
Yeah, I mean, both these teams are very half-court oriented, I would say. They're not like they'll both push the ball if they get offensive rebounds, or if they get rebounds, and they can run.
But they're no Arizona.
They're not Arizona. They're not
no
A&M.
MSU.
They're not Tennessee.
Right.
They're not at their best in transition. And the fact that I think that Purdue has the best half-court offense in the country means that I'm going to have to take them to beat this NC State team and end this magical run. All the statistics are saying to pick Purdue. I mean, obviously they've played fantastic basketball thus far. Zach Edey will be the best player on the floor, I would assume. And I mean, I honestly can see in this game, I visualize a reality where NC State gets in foul trouble early, and that's going to really be the Achilles heel for them going forward.
I'm going to take the fun pick here.
Okay.
One of my best buddies is from NC State. His whole family was at the Clock Tower celebrating the Final Four Sunday night. I don't think that they have much of a chance against a team this dominant. But again, I've said that before about this team. I said it when they went against Duke.
Yep.
I'm going to pick them just as the fun pick, and I will definitely be rooting for them. There's not a bone in my body that wants Purdue to win this game.
I agree. I think everybody will be rooting for them.
They're America's team right now.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So the second game we have to talk about is this UConn-Alabama game. Now, I think that this one's pretty clear in terms of who I think is going to be the winner when it comes down to it. UConn they haven't played a game in the tournament in the past 2 years that has been closer than 13 points. They beat every team that they played by 13 points or more. And Dan Hurley says that it's because they can't win close games, which is pretty funny. And they just went on a 30-0 run against the Illinois team that won the Big Ten.
Historic run.
It's the second biggest run in NCAA March Madness history. The other one was a 44-0 run against either Duquesne or George Mason, I think. But that being said, it's not relevant. The fact that, you can do that against a top 10 team in the country makes no sense to me. The way that this team has played all year, they've been the best team all year. Their guard play is fantastic with Tristan Newton and Cam Spencer. And then you have guys like Donovan Clingan, who are going to be a top 15 draft pick, who's really coming into his own. Stephon Castle has played great thus far throughout the tournament. I mean, Alex Caravan is a sniper. Like, they have so many weapons. And I personally really did not like this Alabama team going into the tournament, regardless of the fact that they've really impressed me thus far. Their offense is really quick. They play fast. Mark Sears has played great. Grant Nelson has played really well. Probably played himself back into the draft, if I'm being honest with you. And like, they're one of the fastest, most fun teams to watch in the country. And obviously them beating UNC makes me a little bit more happy that they're in this position. But like, that being said, this has all the makings of, in my opinion, this has all the makings of a UConn blowout, because they can't defend.
I agree. So it comes down to one thing. Looking at Alabama, you take Mark Sears out of it, you win the game.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that UConn can do that. I think that this week Dan Hurley has had them in practice, and he said, we're going to work on defending the guard in the two-man game. We're going to completely take him out. And if we do that, there isn't a chance that they stay with us. And I absolutely agree. I think that UConn blows them out. I think that UConn goes to the national champion. And they look, to me, at least, like the consensus odds-on favorite to win the title as of right now.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that it's going to come down to coaching in the early parts of the games.
Okay.
I think that Dan Hurley will outcoach. Who's coaching Alabama?
Nate Oates.
Nate Oates, right. I think he will outcoach Nate Oates. I think that in preparation, Alabama has a lot more preparing to do than UConn. And again, I think Nate Oates is a great coach, but I don't think that you can humanly prepare for this UConn team in 4 days' time. I just don't think they can do it. I take UConn.
Yeah, I mean, this UConn offense has been fantastic all year long. There hasn't been a team that has really been able to stifle them, aside from, I think, Creighton, which was the game where they lost by a lot
30
earlier in the season. But they're also a top 30 defensive team when it comes to guarding the three-point line. And Alabama is 6th in the country when it comes to shooting threes. So I think that'll be another really big narrative is this UConn defense really stifling the three ball for Alabama, and that being a big problem for them. Obviously, they both play two very different paces. I mean, Alabama is so incredibly fast and chaotic all the time, and UConn can play fast, and they can also slow it down and play in the half court really well. So it's a really interesting stylistic clash, but I do think that this game very much favors the UConn Huskies, who have looked like the best team all year. So in my opinion, I think UConn gets it done, and they'll be meeting up with Purdue for the battle of the two best teams in the country in the national championship.
All right, well, I have them going against NC State. So
yeah, fair enough. I guess we'll have to wait and see on that one.
I think that we would be remiss to not at least discuss what's going on in the women's college national tournament.
Yeah, we got to talk.
It has been, I think that at least 3 out of the 4 teams we did expect to see go this far, and that is Iowa, UConn, and South Carolina.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people had USC being that 4th team in.
Well, USC lost to UConn.
Or I'm sorry, NC State.
NC State, yeah.
And they did get hot at the right time. Big year for NC State, by the way.
Agreed. They're playing great. Roll back.
Each team has a star that they look at. And they all roughly, I mean, they don't play the same position, but there will be matchups that we're going to watch in every game. I'm going to start with NC State versus South Carolina. South Carolina has not lost a game this season. They have a perfect record.
Yep.
And although, again, NC State is one of the hottest teams in women's basketball right now, I don't think that they'll be able to beat South Carolina. I'm taking South Carolina to go to the chip.
Okay. Yeah, Camila Cardoso in South Carolina have been the best team in women's college basketball all year. And although, SEC basketball hasn't been something that I've really watched when it comes to the women's scene, I've been more so focused on, well, I guess I've watched a bit of LSU going into the tournament. But the way that Dawn Staley has these girls playing, I mean, aside from giving up a near 20-point lead against Indiana in the round of, I think that was the Sweet 16, maybe it was the Elite Eight. Either way, aside from that, they've really had absolutely no problems with any of the teams that they've played thus far. And I think that this may be their year to really, go for an undefeated season. They played fantastic thus far. And although NC State, again, is a great story, the fact that a lot of teams did not expect them to be here, they beat some really good teams. That Texas team they beat in the Elite Eight was really good.
Very good.
And it's been a huge year for that school. I don't think that they have the firepower to get by this South Carolina team.
They'd have to play a perfect game to beat the South Carolina team. And that's how it is a lot when you look at underdogs playing favorites in the women's tournament. They have to play a perfect game. And first time for a lot of those players being on a huge stage. South Carolina's used to it. I think the South Carolina rolls. And if we move to the other game, before we talk about the Final Four matchup, I think that we have to just touch on the biggest women's basketball game of all time in the rematch between LSU and Iowa.
Yep.
Caitlin Clark showed up. Yeah. She had 41 points. And LSU was a great team. Both coaches coached I thought it was a very well coached game. I thought that tactically they both played incredibly well. Iowa was just the better team. And they did get their revenge for the national tournament last year. And I would have loved any result of that game. I loved that LSU team, Flau'jae Johnson and Haley Van Lith. Angel Reese. Yep. It's a great team that's destined for success down the line. But Iowa was truly just better. And if you saw the shots that they were making, they had role players stepping up and having 20-point games. And that's what it takes to win a national championship. So if we roll into this matchup, Iowa advances to play UConn with my personal favorite player, Paige. Yep. As much as I'd love to take UConn in this game, I don't think that they'll be able to stay in it. I do think that just objectively they are a more talented team than LSU.
Okay.
And I'm interested to see the matchup between Caitlin and Paige, but I just don't see it happening. I am going to take Iowa versus South Carolina in the national championship. Yeah,
I mean, this Iowa LSU game is literally the biggest game probably in college basketball this year. I mean, it had 12.8 million viewers, which is more so than every single game except for one in the NBA Finals. Every single game. Like, there were so many people that were watching this game, I myself included. It was an amazing game. And I mean, it's due time that the women's tournament got this type of respect from the national audience. And I think that a lot of that is Caitlin Clark, the way that she has been an ambassador for the sport. And a lot of that is the tension that this Iowa and LSU team had building up to this game. They really don't like each other.
Well, and the storylines with Kim Mulkey going into the game was huge. Yeah. She was being called the villain in newspapers.
Yep.
And it would have been great to see them win and have her go on the stand and slander everyone.
Heel story.
Yeah.
Would have been an amazing heel story. But again, Caitlin Clark is probably the greatest women's basketball prospect of the past. She's the Victor Wembanyama of women's college basketball right now, which is pretty cool to think. And I think I do agree with you and your take on this game coming up. Look, Paige Bueckers has played great all year. Elijah Edwards has played really well. Azzi Fudd, like all these women on this UConn team. And I do think that Nika Mule will probably be the person that matches up with Caitlin Clark when it comes to this game. Probably not Paige versus her, which would be cool to see because she's kind of their lockdown defender. But I do think that this Iowa team and Caitlin Clark are just playing too well to be stopped right now. And I think that you'll see them in the national championship matching up with this South Carolina team.
I am looking forward to that matchup, though.
Agreed.
And I'll definitely be watching that one. But let's switch gears. Let's move away from the college scene and let's move into professional basketball.
Okay.
In terms of the NBA.
Yeah.
Last night we saw one of, if not the most peculiar performance in the history of the NBA.
Yep.
And that is Malachi Flynn of the Detroit Pistons had a 50-point game.
Yep.
With 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and 5 steals.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost to the Hawks.
Yeah.
So the question that I'm just going to throw at you is, do you think that anyone in the NBA on the right night could have 50 points?
I don't know if it's anyone, but like situations are situational, and we all know that. It's certainly perplexing that a guy who scores 5.5 points a game is able to go out there and get the minutes and play well enough to have 50 points on just a random night. And I think that the way that we've seen the scoring boom is in the NBA is kind of indicative of the fact that there is less defense being played, obviously. And and the fact that, the talent level within the NBA is continuing to rise. I think that there was a bit of a dip when it came to the 2010s as to the amount of talented players that are coming into the NBA. But now, like, you see these G League rosters who are loaded with young prospects and guys who are like high draft picks that can't crack an NBA rotation just because there's so much talent in the NBA right now. There are so many great teams, so many great players, and they all come from different backgrounds and stories and whatnot. But like, the fact of the matter is that, across the board, there are so many good players who maybe don't get that opportunity to shine on an NBA stage. Like, you see it with the guy that I think of when it comes to random huge game performances is a guy like Cam Thomas, a guy who went from being like a bench player on the Brooklyn Nets to having like 5 straight 40 balls just because.
And he can get 40 on any night.
Agreed. He's up there. He's a great scorer.
I mean, if you look at guys who aren't all-stars, he's probably number 1 with most 40-point games. I would assume.
It's probably true. But like, it just goes to show you that there's so much scoring talent across the NBA. And although, obviously there's the lack of defense, which most people will point to, I just think the skill level is improving throughout the NBA. And the fact that, you have so many great players going at it night in and night out, it allows for a guy like Malachi Flynn to heat up. This is probably the most random 50 ball since the Corey Brewer one.
I think it's much more random than the Corey Brewer one.
I agree.
Corey Brewer had like a 15-year NBA career.
Yeah.
Malachi Flynn has been on the bench his entire career.
I know. So, I mean, it's certainly perplexing, and I don't think it's something that you're going to be seeing often. But that being said, the talent in the NBA is just on another level right now.
Yeah, and I've written about that before. We talked about it on the show. The NBA gets a bad rap because people say that no one plays defense. It's not that no one plays defense. If you put these guys on a college court, I guarantee you that in most cases, their player would have less than 5 or 10 points. Right? Yeah. It's not a defensive thing. It's just that offensive players can become better at an exponential level, and there's a cap to how good you can be at defense. And right now, it's soaring like this. It's moving up and up, which is why I think you see guys like Malachi Flynn and Cam Thomas go out there. I think about that point that you made with the G Leaguers who can't even crack an NBA roster. Right. It's a great point. In Maine, at home, I think of J.D. Davidson.
Yeah.
He averages like 25 points and 8 assists and can't even smell the floor in an NBA roster, but won G Leaguer of the Year last year because he was so good. I think of Amani Bates for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Generational scorer, will never smell an NBA floor, but like has the capacity, like all of those guys coming out of college, it's a certain kind of player that could get hot and go out there and have a point like have a night like Malachi Flynn did.
Yeah.
So what if you had to name one player in the NBA who could go out there and have a game like Malachi Flynn, who has the potential to just come off the bench and score 50 points, who, by the way, has only been done by 2 players, and that is Malachi Flynn and Jamal Crawford in the 2010s?
Yep.
Who do you think could do it?
Just a random guy from the
random
NBA.
bench guy from the NBA who could go out there and
drop
I
50. Mentioned Cam Thomas before. I think he could probably do it.
No, I don't mean like a rotational guy. I mean like a bench player.
Man. Okay. I think you got to think of rosters that probably aren't in the top tier, if that makes sense right now. Probably teams like maybe the Charlotte Hornets or something like that.
I think Trey Mann is a guy who could go out there and drop a ton of points on a night where all the starters are out.
I don't hate that pick at all.
Yeah. He had a 30-point game against the Celtics 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that's a bad pick. Man, that's a tough question though. There are a lot of guys.
Maybe someone on the Spurs really gets hot,
but like not a rotational player at the same time. You see what I'm saying? Because like you could say like I don't know, like a Keldon Johnson, but he's in the rotation, So like,
yeah, no,
it's
fair enough.
It's more so like young players who just came into the league who haven't really etched their role in.
Right,
yet.
Like I think of a Keontae George who is in the rotation, but is a guy who could randomly have 50 on a night.
Could, yeah. I don't hate that pick at all. He's also a fantastic scorer. Yeah, maybe like a Jonathan Kuminga or something like that.
Or like a Jordan what is his name? He played on UConn last year. Jordan Hawkins could come in and light up the floor.
Yeah, also not a pick I hate. Benedict Mathurin, I think
Yeah,
could do it.
absolutely could.
Maybe a guy like a Keegan Murray, but he's a starter, so like.
Well, he did have 14 3-pointers in the game,
Yeah,
or 12 3-pointers
yeah.
already this season. So yeah, I do agree.
Okay.
Guys like that, a lot of guys coming out of college, I think, could step on an NBA floor and on their right night have a generational performance.
There are just a lot of really good dudes in the NBA. I mean, also like the 3-point line. If you're a 3-point specialist and you get hot one night, like, good luck stopping you.
I was in the building when Sam Hauser was on pace to break Klay Thompson's 3-point record.
Yep.
And then unfortunately went down with an injury like 2 weeks ago. But the entire crowd, every time he hit it through, was like, "Oh shit, he might do it." And he had 10 with 8 minutes left in the third quarter when he got injured. So he was going to annihilate the 3-point record. Unfortunately, we'll never get to see it.
And it's Sam Hauser, a guy who is
Sam Hauser,
maybe a 5 minutes a game guy on the Boston Celtics, which is
right.
Like, it's just absurd. It's just absurd. I mean, but it's a lot of fun to watch. You know, it makes the game more interesting when the teams are this good, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, that'll wrap up our episode. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you for listening. Tune in for our national championship preview. That will be out Monday night. I believe the championship's on Tuesday.
Good question.
It'll be out before the national championship game. Thank you for listening. This has been The Corner Office, and I am Jack Byrne.
And I'm Alex Penders. Corner 3.
That's going to be me in intramural this weekend.
Yeah. I bet.